Hello everyone, I'm Bo from Brutal Commentary, and today I'm going to be breaking our main card opener for UFC Fight Night 263. In this one, we have Nascimento taking on Cody Durden. Nascimento is 21-6 as a professional, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Meanwhile, Durden is 17-8-1 as a professional, 1-4 in his last 5 fights. Looking at Nascimento, currently in the UFC, look just strictly the UFC, he's 3-1 in the promotion. He lost his debut to Tagir Ulanbekov, but that was a really close fight, and he did take Tagir to the limit. Since then, he's won 3 straight fights, defeating Jake Hadley, submitting Carlos Hernandez, and then most recently this May, defeated Rafael Filio, which has aged very well. Meanwhile, for Durden, unfortunately, it's kind of been a tough time. Like I said, 1-4 in his last 5 fights. He was on a 2-fight skid, getting submitted by Tagir Ulanbekov and then knocked out by Bruno Silva. Then he got his only win of his last 5, which is a submission win over Matt Schnell last September. Then suffered a loss to Joshua Van this last December. And in his most recent fight, got knocked out by Jose Ochoa this June. Now, granted, you do look at these 5 names, right? And it's not like Cody Durden's lost to bad fighters, far from it, right? Tagir, top 15, Silva, top 15, Joshua Van, title challenger, and then Jose Ochoa, who is a very good prospect. So he's really only lost to top shelf competition. It's just at this point in his career, Cody Durden is getting pretty old for a flyweight. He's 34. He'll be 35 very soon. And the wear and tear on his body with how aggressive he is with his style hasn't done him any favors for his longevity. Now, another aspect of this fight to look at, this is going to be short notice for Durden. It was supposed to be Nascimento versus Rafael Esteban, which, full disclosure, I was really looking forward to that fight, strictly on a technical aspect, and more so how the grappling between Esteban and Nascimento was going to go, because those two are very high-level control-style grapplers, and I was very intrigued to see how that would go. But unfortunately, Esteban had to pull out, and Durden has now stepped in on roughly a week's notice, a little more than that. Best I would say probably like a week and 2 to 3 days is how long Durden has had to prepare. Now, granted, Durden has fought on short notice before, and he has won before. That, like his win over Matt Schnell, was short notice for him. But that was also up a weight class and not still at 125 pounds. So that is another thing to look at. Now, looking at their styles, it's a kind of a classic control versus chaos approach. For Nascimento, he has some of the best control-based grappling and probably some of the best fundamental jiu-jitsu in the flyweight division. As you look at, for example, Rafael Filio, a very good grappler in his own right, and one who's able to finish the fight through in most positions. I mean, he did just win his last fight via Kimura. And Filio had Nascimento in some pretty bad spots, specifically that mounted guillotine in round 1 of their fight. But eventually, Filio made some some errors in the grappling and was able to get reversed by Nascimento. And from there, Nascimento's ability to control via his positional jiu-jitsu was simply too much. Whether it's his back control or mount, Nascimento has good fundamentals, whether it's harassing the balance, keeping good grips on the wrist so fighters can't build height, or his ability to flow into positions is also very well. You saw, for example, with Carlos Hernandez, how when Hernandez was building height and starting to get to his feet, Nascimento kind of used that as an opportunity to sneak his arm in for the rear naked choke and then switch to the palm-to-palm grip. And then from there, it was purely academic and Hernandez had to tap. The way Nascimento was able to complete it is by using Hernandez's, I would say, lack of awareness, as Hernandez was solely focused on getting up, that it led to Nascimento having the opportunity to sink in the choke. And I mean, again, you look at the Tagir fight. I mean, it's only taken a high-level fighter with, that Dagestan style of wrestling that's very hard for jiu-jitsu fighters to be able to not only control, but even get up from the bottom. But again, that fight was so close that it shows just how good and how Alan Nascimento is on the ground, and how very few fighters are going to be able to contend with him on the ground. That's partially why I was so interested in the Esteban fights, because Esteban himself is not only really big for this division, but has pretty good control-based grappling as well. So having two control-style grapplers go at it is basically going to be a very interesting battle of scrambles and positional dominance. Now, I would say Nascimento's striking is all right. He's pretty big. He's pretty big for this division, and as well, being 5'8" with a 69.5-inch reach. He uses it, I would say, pretty effectively. He's got good kicks, but specifically, it's his safe boxing. Just simple jabs, cross. Doesn't really throw too much out there, but he will throw if fighters come after him. So it's not like if Nascimento's in a firefight, he's helpless. Meanwhile, you have Cody Durden, who would be the kind of chaos to this control versus chaos matchup that I'm saying this fight is. For Durden, he's kind of fights like a pit bull. Ultra aggressive, ultra well-rounded offense. Durden will happily strike with his opponents or happily grapple with them. Doesn't matter either way. Durden will come forward and attack with constant pressure. Now, the problem with that is for Durden, it has left him in some bad situations that he himself has gotten himself into. For example, in Durden's loss to Bruno Silva, he was winning that fight, outstriking Silva, outgrappling Silva for the most part, but eventually he just walked in and dipped his head right into an uppercut by Silva, and that was basically it at that point, as eventually Silva just finished ground and pound. But Durden, I'm not going to say he kind of gave him the shot, but you saw Durden dip his head and not really keep his chin tucked, and Silva was able to time the uppercut because he knew Durden was going to constantly go after him and try and give Silva no room to work. Now, that being said, Durden has, I would say, pretty good overall wrestling. Pretty good, your typical American style wrestling, single, shooting for the single or shooting for the double and running it up the pipe. That's kind of how he works. It's kind of like Mitch Raposo, just more explosive takedown entries, not so much on chaining them together and going for like trips or throws, like say how Nascimento does in the clinch. Now, once Durden is able to get on top, he's pretty good overall with those positions. Specifically, he's very good from mount, where he unloads with his ground and pound, whether it's those smashing elbows and or hammer fist. And Durden's also not a novice with his submissions either. He does have some pretty good chokes, as when he got Matt Schnell via ninja choke, as Schnell shot for a telegraph takedown, and Durden was able to just cinch up the choke and get the neck. Made Matt Schnell tap out real quick with that. Overall, though, when you have a battle between control and chaos, it comes down to who can dictate the fight first, and then once they do, can they keep the fight on their pace? For Nascimento, he's going to be looking to control the striking, control the distance, and control when the fight will hit the ground. For Durden, he's going to be looking to pressure Nascimento and not only control the striking by making it a wild brawl, but control the grappling via making it scramble heavy and just having overall better cardio. That is going to be one thing I think Durden has over Nascimento in this fight. Durden's gas tank is going to be a critical factor, as Durden has an overall pretty good gas tank. He can go a hard 15 minutes, as shown in a lot of his fights that went to the decision. As, for example, the Joshua Van fight. Now, Joshua Van was putting it on Cody Durden and kind of did whatever he wanted to him. But Cody Durden was tough enough and had the gas tank to keep fighting and keep trying in that fight. Now, Nascimento doesn't present that kind of boxing threat like Van, nor the power of like Jose Ochoa to make Durden pay for his aggression like those two. But that being said, Nascimento has more of a threat like Tagir Ulanbekov did for Durden, where one, he's going to be the bigger guy. Two, he's going to have the overall better positional jiu-jitsu. And 3, make Durden pay for his over-aggression, like, say, shooting telegraph takedowns or shooting one too many takedowns in succession, and leaving his back exposed for Nascimento to take, or his head out there too long for Nascimento to sink in a choke. Now, looking at the odds for this fight, it's actually pretty close. Minus 125 for Nascimento, plus 100 for Durden. It's not that they're not that far apart in the odds wise. It's almost a pick 'em, but Nascimento is a slight favorite. Makes sense. He's already prepared for this fight. He's not on short notice. And overall, Nascimento has a style to beat Cody Durden. A lot of times when you do have these chaos versus control matchup, the most recent example that's coming off the top of my head would be like Yuri versus Rakic. The trick for these fighters that thrive in chaos is to, one, never respect the power coming back at them, and 2, no matter what offense is coming after them, whether it be striking or grappling, constantly push forward, constantly attack, and wait for the opponent to make mistakes as they are trying to get breathing room. But when you have a division, but the difference is, like, with that division, that's light heavyweight, right? They may not be as skilled nor as fast as the fighters in the lower weight classes. Not to mention, with the kind of power they possess, those types of mistakes the control-based fighter is looking for leads to many more opportunities for the chaos fighter to snatch victory into their hands and find the opening to, say, get a knockout or a submission. But in this type of division, with these types of skill sets that these two have, I think Cody Durden is going to run himself into a submission in this one. I'm officially going to pick Alan Nascimento, and I'm going to pick him via submission. Durden has been submitted many times in his career, like, for example, against Muhammad Mokaev, Tagir Ulanbekov, as prime examples. And I just think with Durden's over-aggression, I think he's going to leave himself open for Nascimento to be able to control him on the ground for vast portions of the fight and eventually find an opening for a rear naked choke or a guillotine, especially the guillotine if Durden does get, again, overzealous with his takedowns and leaves his neck out there for too long. That's kind of how I see this fight going. Or most of it is, for example, Nascimento is able to stuff a takedown, kind of get a trip in the clinch, and then from there can work his control-based jiu-jitsu. Eventually, Durden would give up his back, and Nascimento will cinch up a choke. Either way, I think Alan Nascimento is going to win, and I'm going to pick him via submission. Now, there's one thing that's kind of been eating at my mind for a second in this fight as I'm talking, is if Durden starts to get too passive, like he knows his over-aggression has kind of left him vulnerable in these positions, there is a possibility that Durden gets too passive and then Nascimento is the one pressing forward, and then that would be even worse, as especially fighters like Durden who rely on their aggression, when they start giving space and real estate to their opponent, they're not good off their back foot whatsoever. They don't know how to fight off there. Their wrestling is much more telegraphed, so is their striking. And it just leaves the control-based fighter with even more opportunities. So either way that you look at it, for me anyway, I got to go with Alan Nascimento. And again, I'm picking him via submission. But with that being said, that's been my breakdown of this fight. If you like the video, comment and subscribe. Next up, we will have Charles Radke versus Daniel Franza. But until then, I've been Bo from Brutal Commentary. And thank you all for listening. Take care.